What dark moment in a kid's show threw you off guard? Rewatching Atla as an adult who's read 1984 and realizing Ba Sing Se is straight up a dystopian city. Dumbo, the pink elephant sequence. Pure nightmare fuel. The part from Teen Titans when Slade is trying to convert Raven. The Lion King. Mufasa's death almost always make me cry. That one scene in Avatar, The Last Airbender, when they are in Lake Laogai and they walk past that room where they are basically brainwashing the Judies. That messed me up. When Maul straight up conquered an entire fucking planet to get Obi-Wan's attention, and then straight up murdered his love interest in front of him, the Clone Wars. Ma Ingalls frickin' trying to chop her own leg off in a foot of fever. WTF. This answers are related. But not a kid show. The movie Bridge to Terabithia. Very innocent. Childlike. And fun. It takes a dark turn. Ren and Stimpy. While not any particular moment, I'd say a lot of the close-up shots were quite graphic and repulsive. At least from a child's perspective, I was always a little grossed out. My auntie still has a ton of episodes on VHS tapes. There was also that one Courage the Cowardly Dog episode of A Grinning Man. Or a fox. I can't remember, but the figure was slender and the whole tone and suspense of the episode's story was unnerving. I remember another episode about Courage saving a woman from her seemingly abusive boyfriend. Now that I look back on it, it's incredibly disturbing how real a scenario that can be for some women out there. When Homer tried to kill himself. Not really a kid show, but it was my childhood. The entirety of Animals of Farthingwood. The movie My Girl. Slavery in Samurai Jack was a big one. Always felt so evil and wrong. Hated those blue guys like no other. Infinity Train was already dark. But Season 2 had a person ground into a pulp while screaming. While Season 3 had a guy disintegrate Raiders of the Lost Ark style. The air conditioner scene in The Brave Little Toaster. That scene scared the shit out of me as a little kid, cause I don't like when people yell really bad. Episode of Johnny Bravo when he babysits that kid with abnormal powers. The parents with the duck squeaking feet sent that episode to the dark side. That one episode of Madeline where she gets adopted or is convinced her parents want her again, I don't remember, and is just kidnapped by a child labor cult and kept in a basement and forced to make lace. Seems most folks here are too young to remember all the very special episodes of 80s TV. Including Silver Spoon's hunting episode. Facts of Life rape episode, might have been 2 of these. Different Strokes pedophile episode. Someone already mentioned Punky Brewster. Gimme a Break getting robbed at gunpoint episode. I'm sure I could come up with one for every show I watched as a kid if it wasn't 2 a.m. One particular Courage the Cowardly Dog episode with that Slenderman-looking figure. Star Wars The Clone Wars where Darth Maul decapitates 5 people. That scene in Gravity Falls where Bill Cipher swaps the holes in some guy's face really scared me when I was younger. Couldn't sleep for a few days thinking about it. Infinity Train. Watched a dismembered guy get ground up by a train's wheels. A teenager murder the mother figure of a young child. And that same teen getting dissolved into a skeleton. Yup, made for kids. The Transformers animated movie from the late 80s. For the first 15 minutes most of the Autobots that we watched and got used to seeing all get brutally killed one by one. Then Optimus Prime dies. The heroes actually die at the beginning of a children's movie. I think we're all traumatized by Cherry getting locked in the refrigerator on Punky Brewster. My other terrifying memory is when they're lost in the cave and her friend's demonic heads and limbs are embedded in the cave wall. What sadist wrote this show? Ren and Stimpy where Ren was actually gonna kill Stimpy. That shit was dark. Digimon Season 1 with Ty's backstory. I was a kid back then when it first premiered on Fox. It was the episode where Ty recounts the story of when he took his sister outside to play. He didn't understand why she couldn't be outside and end up regretting it later when she was rushed to the hospital. His sister has a weak immune system, so she was often sick. His mom was so upset she struck Ty on the face. I have never seen an adult hit a kid on TV before. As a kids show, I didn't really expect any real type of problems or consequences. Majority of Ben 10, Alien Force and Ultimate Alien. While its predecessor was a bit more lighthearted and yeah, there were a few moments that were dark. The sequels before OV took a serious route and made it feel like a DC animated show. Darkest moment of the show was definitely when in Ultimate Alien, Ben felt forced to kill his former arch-rival, now best friend Kevin, who ended up absorbing the DNA in his watch and became an insane power-hungry monster. Thankfully it didn't happen and he managed to revert him back to normal. Also, beginning of Alien Force started off with the death of an ally who was shot in the wound during battle and would have had so much potential in joining his team. I honestly wished we didn't have that unnecessary reboot and continued with what those shows were able to do, which was appeal more to both adults and children and have a more in-depth story. It's sad how we got from that to a silly little kiddie reboot made for cash. There was this movie on Netflix called The Little Prince. I turned it on and watched it with my kids. By the end we were all crying uncontrollably. It took me an hour to calm my kids down to go to bed, lol. Don't watch it without tissues. Pinocchio, the Disney version. I haven't watched it in over 20 years. There is a scene after the boys have turned into donkeys. The guy grabs one of the donkeys and asks its name. My name's Oliver and I want my mother. This one can still talk. It's not ready yet. Then he throws it into the back of the pen and the poor thing whimpers and cowers into the corner. That scene fucked me up, man. The last couple episodes of Gravity Falls shocked the hell out of me. I'm going to turn those children into corpses. That part in The Brave Little Toaster where they devote an entire musical number to a bunch of old broken down cars reminiscing about their life stories and mourning their own lost former glory days as they're captured and executed one by one. Worthless. Or just The Brave Little Toaster in general. Really? In Adventure Time, when it turned out that the Lich had killed Billy and was using his skin as a disguise. The episode of the original Powerpuff Girls with him. Something about him was so terrifying. Toy Story 3 where the toys are going through the waste sorting system and end up in the fire pit. Cow and Chicken. That shit was like a traumatic fever dream. When SpongeBob was watching a dancing anemone on his TV and quickly flipped the channel when Gary came in the room. That kid having his eyes ripped out on Invader Zim. That episode in Rugrats when Stu is making pudding at 4 in the morning because he's lost control of his life. Millennial humor in a nutshell. Also that episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog when he enters a parallel universe of bananas with monkey overlords or something. That shit was dark as hell. The chicken head being chopped off during the riverboat scene of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. In one of the later episodes of the show Static Shock, Richie tries to stop a kid from shooting up their school. Richie gets shot during the confusion. 90s kids gonna have a field day in this thread. All Courage the Cowardly Dog and the Misadventures of Flapjack. Not technically a kids show but the anime called Made in Abyss. I watched the show without having any background knowledge of the show. The animation and story reminded me of a Studio Ghibli movie. Two kids go off to seek an adventure. Then, it happens. The butterfly episode from SpongeBob. Bloodbending in Atla. When Azula had a full mental collapse in Avatar: The Last Airbender. One reason I like that show so much is there is a lot of hidden things a kid wouldn't pick up on. Abuse. Fascism, well, as much as you can put in a kid's show, among many others. The episode of the Powerpuff Girls where they go into the future and the entire world was taken over by him. It was just so dark and creepy. And the tone was completely different from the rest of the show. The episode was called Speed Demon. There was an episode of CatDog where they went inside out. Or one of them inverted or something so you could see their insides. Freaked me out as a kid. That time a teenager on Captain Planet got addicted to drugs and then full on died of an overdose on screen. When Olaf wants to marry Violet on a series of unfortunate events and she thinks about what it would be like to wake up next to him every morning and go to bed with him every night, incredibly creepy. Plenty of moments from Invader Zim. But the one that always seems to stand out is the one where Zim systematically hunts down the kids at his school to steal their organs. so that he'd appear more human. Thing is, Zim is a dumbass and has no concept of which organs a human should have. Or how many. So he just takes whatever he feels like and ends up a bloated mass of alien flesh filled with multiple human hearts, livers, spleens, etc. It's fucked up. Locke Wenzahir kills the Earth Queen. I didn't see it until I was an adult. But the scene in the claymation adventures of Mark Twain with Satan. That was trippy. The Don Bluth movies were dark. American Tail, Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH. All Dogs Go to Heaven. And The Land Before Time. I think the older stuff from the 70s and early 80s was even worse. Though. The Last Unicorn and the animated Hobbit were crazy. A popular 90s kids show was Rocko's Modern Life. Again. A lot of the episodes were questionable and probably shouldn't have been seen by young, innocent eyes. Particularly bad were the scenes in To Heck and Back. Heifer, Rocko's sidekick, chokes at a restaurant called the Choky Chicken and dies. Yes. He dies. He tries to go to heaven, but then ends up in heck. Heifer then meets Peaches, a parody of Satan. He has udders on his head that secrete milk, which is very confusing and gross. The most unsettling scene of this whole episode is when Peaches tells Heifer that his punishment will be to watch his best friend Rocko starve to death in his carcass. Sounds to us like that was taken straight out of a horror movie. Thanks for watching.